Welcome to the Taking a Breath podcast with Parker Mays.
Welcome back, everybody, to this week's episode of the Taking a Breath podcast. I'm excited today to jump into a fantastic conversation with my guest. But before we do, I want to highlight the community platform. We meet every Saturday at 10 a.m. for 1 hour, and it's a chance to connect with other listeners who have ambitious goals and values similar to yours in terms of business, leadership, and entrepreneurship. And so very excited to continue those conversations with you all as listeners. But in the meantime, welcoming today Ted Lawlor, who is my guest. He is the host of the #1 business podcast in the UK, If Only They Knew. And he reached out with the intention of expanding his audience to new young listeners and reaching some good minds. So I introduced him to Taking a Breath, and I'm excited to have him on today. So Ted, welcome to the podcast, and would love for you to share a little bit about yourself for those who don't know you.
Yeah, thank you, mate. I'm loving the energy. That's what I'm all about lately as well. Like we said when we spoke before, it's all about high energy, sort of keeping the levels up, sort of keeping it positive as well. Yeah, so like you said, I'm Ted Lawlor. I'm the 23-year-old owner of If Only They Knew, which is the hub for young business minds in the UK. And I'm also more recently, weirdly, I'm an author of the Manifestation Journal. And I do a few other bits on the side as well. I sort of do quite a lot, but try to sort of, keep my fingers in all the different pies. So yeah, that's a bit about me, and yeah, looking forward to this chat.
Incredible. And it's cool, as you listeners will come to find out, Ted is just the master of the side hustle, always has something going on, and has been really keeping his hands in different things for over the last few years. But Ted, there was a transitional moment or a transformational moment for you back when you were in university. And I would love to kind of start off the conversation today talking about that. What was that moment for you, and how did that failure shape your future?
Yeah, that's it. No, you was right. Is when I was at uni, I think I was in the first or sort of coming into the second year of uni. Obviously you do 3 years, and I was in the first or second, and I was struggling. I was in a retail job that I hated. I was in a game store, and I didn't play games. So I was sort of out of my depth, didn't like being told what to do, always known I could never really work for someone else. It just weren't right for me. And I was sort of struggling for money, and I was just sort of, I just had no money, literally. And I went down to -£5, and it was one of them. I was always scared to check my bank account. And I left it for weeks, and then one day I checked it and it was -5, and literally I had like tears in my eyes, because I just thought, oh my day, how have I got to this point? Like, I was doing so well before, sort of managing my money, like never going below a certain amount, and now I'm at -5. And yeah, from there I was like, you know what, this ain't happening anymore. I need to make a massive change. And we'll get onto it, but yeah, from -£5 to 5 figures, and sort of straight up as well, sort of no ups, downs. It's just straight up. And I sort of put that all on the mindset more than anything.
Insane. And so now what happened back in, this was September of 2017. I kind of want to walk through your journey and your story here for a minute, but you started putting out the social media content on If Only They Knew, which at the time hadn't even developed into the podcast yet, was just this social media platform. So tell us a little bit about this. What was the mission behind it for you to start putting out content? And then how did it transition into the podcast?
Yeah, so like I said, I was on -5, so I was struggling. I made that decision, and that decision was basically to get my ass into gear, get things going, like really sort of step up the gear. So I was like, what can I do? I'm sort of in a weird position, because I have to do 3 years doing what I'm doing now. I can get a side job, but it's not going to be much at all. So it will sort of boost my funds up, but I feel like I had to do something to really sort of get me to a good point. So I thought, you know what, why don't I start my own little thing, my own little side project. And I was doing business and marketing. I thought, right, that's it. What I'm going to do, I'm going to set up just an Instagram page. I'm going to keep my head involved in the business world by finding all entrepreneurs, their stories, interesting articles, and start sharing it, mainly as a way to sort of keep my head in that industry, keep my head sort of afloat, because I'm one of those people, if I'm not heavily involved all day every day, then I'll just float off and I'll be thinking of stupid things and out doing craziness. So I need to be in the zone at all times. So yeah, that was my way of doing it. And I called it If Only They Knew, just because that's what I was thinking at the time. I was like, if only they knew my potential, like everyone out in the world. I just had that like weird feeling, like I just knew I would be successful. I knew I had something in me. And I just felt like the uni and just people in general just weren't seeing that or weren't respecting it. So yeah, that's the brief startup story of how it come about.
And you talked about, I heard you say this one time, that when you were in university, you were kind of learning the like theory or like concepts, but you didn't feel like you actually knew how to apply the business or marketing things that you were learning. So how did If Only They Knew and kind of the real world stuff that you started to get involved in, how did that take what you were learning conceptually and actually apply it concretely?
Yeah, that's it. I think there's a big difference, and I see it now with some people. Um, I see it now with some people. They understand something, but they don't know it. Like there's a big difference. I know it sounds like two of the same things, but it's what I was going through. I was like, okay, I understand what they're saying in terms of this is that, in terms of like the business educational side of things. I understood the concept and the theories and everything, but it felt very outdated. And I was like, well, how can I actually implement this? So that's where If Only They Knew come from, and it gave me the real world experience, because I looked at what I was learning and where I was and where I wanted to go, and I noticed that massive gap in between those two things. So like you said, I used If Only They Knew to do like the baby steps of what I wanted to do in the future. I knew I wanted to be involved in social media and content creation, so I started up the Instagram page to just slowly start getting a feel for, okay, how does it work if I make content and put it out there? And it just sort of baby steps, and it grew into a podcast, blogs, interviews, etc., etc. And it's just taking those small steps and letting it snowball over time. And that's how I sort of got that confidence, because it felt a bit more real.
And one of the things that I've heard you say is that, If Only They Knew was created to kind of inform and inspire young entrepreneurs, or I've also heard you say it as, it's kind of the hub for young business minds. And so how did the podcast fit into that vision and where you wanted to take If Only They Knew?
Yeah, it was a weird one actually, because when I first started the page, I never really thought of the podcast. Like I said, it sort of snowballed, and then things I thought I never would have done just started sort of, they were just there on a plate, and I was like, I'd be stupid not to take it. But I used to listen to a lot of podcasts, again, to get that real world experience. What are other people thinking? What are other people doing? And one day I was listening to Stephen Bartlett, Diary of a CEO podcast.
Okay.
And I was like, I like what he's saying, and as well as Gary Vee as well. I was liking what they were saying, but for me, there was just something missing. Like that I don't know what it was, but I just felt, you know what, I want to say similar things, but with my own little twist on it. I was like, oh, obvious answer. Why don't I start a podcast? So that's sort of where it come about, to share my story, to share my advice, and just sort of hope it resonates with people similar to me as well. And yeah, it's really allowed me to take If Only They Knew to the next level, because it's sort of brought new people on. Like we said before, I was interviewing people from The Apprentice, and yeah, it just allowed me to sort of get my name out there a bit more as well, whilst keeping my head in the game and helping other people out. So it's a really good tool.
Yeah. And is there any tips that you have for what I see a lot is students making one-time connections? So maybe it's either being involved in a community, kind of meeting someone in passing, or being at a career fair, meeting an employer in passing, or for you and I, it's literally on a weekly basis, meeting guests that are either in passing or people that we know. Any tips from what you've found to be able to take a one-time connection and actually build a relationship over time with it?
Yeah, well, funny you say that, because one of the guests I had on my podcast, Robert Icy, he's now my business partner, and he's the one that I'm doing a lot of work with, including the manifestation journal. So
nice.
that was just, again, so unexpected. Everything that's happened to me has just been like completely random almost. And yeah, that bringing Robert Icy on as a guest, I thought would be a one-off. And then afterwards, I said, mate, I really liked your sort of just your vibe, the positive energy. Started asking him a few more questions that would help me in future episodes and future work I did, and just sort of keeping that ping pong back and forth. So I'd ask him something, he'd give me something, then I'd say to him in return to give him something. I'd say, okay, why don't I do this logo for you? Because I've noticed on your page your logo looks a bit whatever, and then blah blah blah, or just I'll help you with a video. So we was going back and forth. I was helping him, he was helping me, but it was sort of, again, it was quite random and sort of off the cuff. And then eventually we said, look, why don't we just meet? We're clearly on the same wavelength. We met. I did a therapy session with him because that's what he is. He's the UK's #1 therapist.
Nice.
So I did a therapy session. He gave it to me for free. We started speaking even more. Then I was like, right, we need to do something together. I've got this idea of a journal. You've got the knowledge to put in the journal. Let's go.
Yeah.
And that's sort of where it came from. So yeah, that back and forth, giving, taking, asking, all of those, I think that's the best way to sort of build that relationship after a podcast.
I love that. And how did you identify the where you could give? You know, and I think for a lot of young people, it's like, I don't really know how I could be a person of value. You know, starting out, how did you identify where you could contribute to those relationships?
I thought about this for a while in terms from the perspective of sort of how to find your passion. And I'll answer this bit and then it will sort of relate. Like, I think
Sure.
my passions have come from the things that I was doing as a kid anyway. You know, when you look back and you're like, oh wow, I was actually doing that without realizing, and that's what I'm doing now, just getting paid for it. So it's quite weird, like just silly things. Like when I was a kid, I played Call of Duty and put the camera on a stack of like 20 DVDs, so it would reach the TV, and I'd film like some of my kill cams and stuff like that, upload it. The footage is actually still available. I might have to dig that out. And like it was like the blurriest footage ever. But I just enjoyed the whole process of creating the content. I was doing branding. I had all the logos. I'd tell everyone in my little team, right, guys, you need to change your gamer tags to this, so it all fits the brand. And this was when I was probably, I don't know, like 12, 13, whatever it was. So I was sort of doing it without realizing. And I guess that's sort of, the passion stems from that. But it's the same thing in terms of your question. That's sort of where your skills probably come from as well. If you don't know initially what your skills are, take a look back and you'll probably find out, wow, I've been doing this one thing over and over again. Let me see if I can really sort of home in on that, find my skill or your passion, whatever it may be, and see if you can monetize it or help other people out. But in that specific example of Rob, I was always good, like I said, branding, marketing, and I noticed he could do with some help in that sense. And yeah, I offered it to him, and it was a good little value add for him, and yeah, it sort of built that relationship. But yeah, definitely skills and passion are normally deep rooted into what you've been doing for a while.
That's fantastic. And that is such a great point of finding that overlap, you know, like, hey, you know, there's this area that you're passionate about or multiple areas, and then there's things that you're good at, right? And then where can we identify that overlap, especially as we're young? So I love that you bring that up. And then my kind of follow up to that is then, you know, how did you know who that audience could be, or who did you know who you wanted to reach out to? Who did you want to network with? Maybe you can share. I know that originally a lot of your guests were from the TV show The Apprentice. Maybe you can share a little bit of your background there as well in this answer. But yeah, what was that target audience like for you?
Yeah, again, it just sort of comes from just that mirroring effect, I guess. I knew what I'd like, so I thought the easiest route, it's sort of like a get out of jail free card. I was like, instead of sort of trying to appeal to another audience that I don't know, why don't I just make content that I'd like to see?
That's so good. That's so good. And so within that, obviously it became, you know, entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs. It was content, you know, you almost were this target avatar for the brand. What would I want to see became what you created. And so part of that was you had applied twice for the TV show, The Apprentice. Walk us through a little bit of what that experience was like and operating under pressure, and what for people who don't know, you know, what is The Apprentice? What's the goal of being a part of it?
Yeah, so The Apprentice was always something I used to watch on the TV every year it came round. Again, just to sort of keep my mind in that business world. It made me
Yeah.
feel like I was learning stuff and sort of bettering myself, even though it probably wasn't the best sort of thing to model, because it's obviously heavily sort of TV based and you have to have a certain personality and stuff like that. But for some aspects, it was good to sort of, allow me to sort of get some advice from it. So yeah, I thought, first of all, why don't I reach out to these people, because they're clearly doing well and it's one thing that I'm passionate about, and it made the whole process a lot easier and less daunting. So I reached out to a few, and I was sort of taken back by just how easy it was. I was expecting it to be a lot more difficult, and like most of them from 2017 when I started doing this, most of them said yes. I got an interview with all of them, and then I was like, you know what? I'm really becoming invested in this whole apprentice thing. Why don't I take the leap of faith, seeing as I'm slowly realizing how easy and sort of seamless things are becoming? Why don't I take the leap of faith and just apply to actually be on the show myself? So it didn't go well, unfortunately. I applied twice. I didn't get on, but I'm a big believer in everything happens for a reason. Actually, I've applied 3 times: once this year, once last year, and once the year before. And the past 2 times this year I didn't get through at all, so I didn't get chosen for the audition process. Last year I got chosen for the audition process and went to the building where it was, and I was there for 5 minutes. Whereas the year before I got through and was there for, I think, 7 hours.
Wow.
But that this may sound a bit mystical and a bit woo-woo, but I really do believe it happens for a reason, as it just sort of seemed like the easy kill. Like it didn't. I just walked in and walked out practically in 5 minutes, so it didn't feel like I invested too much emotion and time into it. So it sort of helped soften the wound a little bit. And obviously, then this year and last year are now, they've both been delayed because of the coronavirus. So it sort of seems like it was meant to happen. Because if I would have gone through the whole process, got chosen, and then found out it got delayed, and then sort of got scrapped completely, I would have been in tears. So yeah, I'm sort of happy it didn't sort of go that way. But I don't know. I don't know whether I should apply for the 4th time or not.
Was there anything that you learned about kind of stress management and the way that you interact under high pressure situations from those experiences that's kind of applied in your business context?
Yeah, 100%. I work so much better under stress, even though at the time I'm like, oh, this is horrible, I hate it. But it brings out the best in me, because, and it's the same, like, again, it made me sort of more comfortable with the idea of being under stress. Like now, if I have a podcast guest, I leave it until like the day before to start planning. I know that sounds nuts, but it just means that I'm in that zone and nothing else can take me out of that zone, because I have to get it done. Whereas if I try and plan like the week before, I'm like, I'll do a few questions. I'm not really in the zone. I'm like on the phone, listening to this, listening to that. I'm just like so all over the place. So I have to be like fully put under pressure and put in that zone. So yeah, it sort of made me a lot more comfortable with the idea of it's okay to be under a bit of pressure, if that's how you sort of cope and work.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that, because I know that it's so true. Like for me, I get down to the wire. Obviously, in this context, like I had done my listening and everything before we met the first time. But in a lot of situations, I'm the same way, where, once I get down to it and I've got the 3 hours left, I'm going to do the thing, the paper, the assignment, whatever it may be. And so I'm curious, because some people are saying, that procrastination or waiting till the last minute, it's a negative thing. Some people like you and I have some of those tendencies where we wait and then in that last minute we do it. Any thoughts on that for someone who may view procrastination as negative versus positive? Like, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I think that, again, this is something, Robert, I see that my business partner taught me. He showed me the Myers-Briggs type indicator. Have you heard of that before? Yeah. He showed me that. I've never heard of it before, and he showed me that, and I did the test and I found out what personality type I was. And he basically said for one of his other business partners' projects, I just couldn't be involved, because I wasn't the right personality type. And I thought, wow, that's so harsh. That is so harsh and so brutal. He was like, no, we're looking for a detailed person, and you're a more big pictured person.
Yeah.
And I didn't really understand it at the time. And I was like, oh, okay. After learning a bit more and interacting with people with that in the back of your mind, you're like, oh, I can see it at play here. I can see why you need to pick and choose who you're working with. So in terms of procrastination, for me, understanding the different personality types there are and just how prominent and powerful they are,
Yes.
that's really made me say, okay, like for some people, you just can't procrastinate. Like, don't try and nick someone else's blueprint, and vice versa. Some people, they have to procrastinate just because that's who they are. Much like me, I have to be in the zone to be 100%. Otherwise, I'm 1% and I'm outside, inside. My brain's all over the place.
Yeah.
So I think anyone listening, if they want to truly understand the best working habits for them, the Myers-Briggs type indicator, I think, would be a perfect tool for them. It's free. Just Google it. It'll be online. It's nothing to do with me, so I'm not selling
no,
it.
yeah, and I've taken it. I've taken it as well and used it in multiple settings for team and leadership stuff. I'll link it in the show notes. So if you haven't taken Myers-Briggs, essentially there's 4 different categories that you get ranked, introverted, extroverted, a judging, feeling, a couple, things like that. And there's so much detail about it. So if you're interested in that, I'll link it in the show notes as well. And definitely I recommend it as well. It's a great self-awareness tool, if nothing else. Who are you getting to know yourself a little bit better? So great call out there and value add. My last place that I want to go is, you've mentioned it a couple of times, but you've got the manifestation journal coming out sooner than you thought. So talk to us a little bit about what the process was like of putting this together. Where I see you headed, I'm excited. I think you're going to become one of the, kind of an expert in the manifestation space over the next few years. So I'm excited to watch that journey, but would love to just hear a little bit about what inspired the project and what's coming up with it.
Yeah, so it's something that I've started getting into only fairly recently, like the past year or two, in terms of the world of manifestation and spirituality. I'm ashamed of myself to say that once I was so arrogant and ignorant to everything, like like even like mad things, like if people were talking about religion and stuff, I'll be like, oh, here we go, like another one of those guys, sort of thing. And it's only when it sort of was forced upon me, like through different actions and like my experience, I started realizing, hold on, there's something very weird going on in the world, like in terms of the coincidences, which I don't think there are such thing as coincidences, but I call them coincidences with my little fingers in quote marks, just to just because I don't think they are coincidences. I think they're more synchronicities. And these synchronicities started really building up for me. And I was like, okay, like I said, there's something weird going on. I started looking into it, started finding out the names and the terms for everything. And then I was like, oh, manifestation, what is that? And again, like I said, with the passion thing, it was something I've been doing since I was a kid without realizing. I was always visualizing in school. And weirdly, some of the things that I was visualizing in the classroom, I've actually caught myself in those moments. So like literally specific moments, I'll be like, oh my God, this is the moment that I visualized 5, 6, 7 years ago. So it was really that the proof's in the pudding, I guess. It was just the evidence was so clear from my perspective that I was like fully involved in this world. And like I said, sorry, go on.
No, I was gonna say, and how did you initially get into like manifesting? I mean, it sounds like a lot of it was just, you were doing it unconscious or not knowing what it was. But once you became aware of what this kind of is, like, how did you dive deeper into it? Was there any books or resources that you used to learn more about it?
Again, it was the synchronicities. There was one point a few years ago, only two or 3 years ago, where I was so depressed. I was like standing, when you're just in a dark place. Like I was standing on the edge of the train tracks, like on the underground. My toes were over the edge, and for no reason. Like I wasn't going to jump, but I was just so down that I was just doing stupid things. I was just not, when you're just not with it at all. So I remember I caught myself mentally one day. I was like standing on the underground and my toes were over the platform and there's no barriers or anything. And the train was coming through and like the train was like so close to like the tip of my toe. And then all of a sudden I was like, whoa, what am I doing? It was like I just woke up. I was like, what is going on here? And I was like, this was on the way to work, a job I hated. And as I was in work, I was like, right, I need to sort this out. So like I said, I was always listening to podcasts. But again, like I said, if I'm not 100% in the zone, then I'm completely out of it and I'm complete chaos. So I was like, right, I need to get back onto listening to these podcasts, getting back in that zone that I was in 2017, where I was starting building, I was going places, everything seemed really strong and sort of exciting. I need to get back to that space mentally. So I loaded up the podcast app again, started listening to podcasts, Stephen Bartlett, Gary Vee, Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, and sort of bit by bit, all the synchronicities and all the ruts and the ladders seemed to start building themselves, and it helped me sort of one by one. I was like, okay, next step. I learned about this type of thing, manifestation. Now I'm on to more deeper stuff, and it one by one, I kept going and going and going, and that sort of built myself up. But yeah, it's sort of, there was no real one sort of thing that I listened to. I was like, wow, manifestation. It was just coincidences and things being pulled towards me, I guess.
That story is so powerful. I gotta tell you, like, that story shows how important it is to be engaged actively in your life. You know, it sounds so simple, being actively engaged, but it is so easy to get on that kind of hamster wheel of doing the same thing over and over again, and realizing that, wow, like, without even realizing it, I could go from, you know, content to unhappy, or unhappy to even more unhappy, or, you know, and it's so easy right now. So I appreciate your vulnerability sharing that. As this comes out, I know it's not out yet, but will be available hopefully, you know, pretty soon. Is there a place that you already know of that people could go once it's out to see it? Or is there anywhere people could go to connect with you specifically, so that when it is out, they'll be notified of it?
Yeah, definitely. At the moment, we've got the website and that's set up, but we're just sort of waiting on a few things. Everything's lurking in the background.
Okay.
So for now, the best place would be my Instagram at Ted Lawlor, TEDLAWLOR. You'll be able to find If Only They Knew, my podcast, the journal, everything I'm doing will be on there.
Love it. Cool. Well, that's perfect. And guys, I highly recommend checking out If Only They Knew, the podcast. You know, obviously you guys are all already podcast listeners and right in the target audience. So if you like what I'm doing and are looking for even more specific business content, this is the place to be. So follow him there, check out the podcast. And Ted, I really appreciate you being on today. It's been fantastic to learn from you and hear your experience and story. And I'm excited to share it with everyone else.
No, thank you, mate. It's been a pleasure. You're a great host and a great guy, it seems. So thank you so much.
I really appreciate it. And for everyone listening, if you're interested, make sure to follow us at Taking a Breath Podcast on Instagram. That's where we post the clips every week and we post highlights for things coming up. So if you're not following us there, make sure to, and we will see you again next week for another episode.
Thanks for listening to the Taking a Breath podcast with Parker Mays.